Hey, what's up? Here we are with another episode of What's Up Conversations. I was looking at the stats of the podcast, seeing how it's going, and I was surprised, really. The show is doing really great, and I'm so happy that it's reaching all across the globe and people are learning so much from great minds of the industry. So please like, subscribe, and do whatever you do to let other people know about this podcast to make What's Up Conversations even bigger. In this episode, I had a great conversation with Terry Hess, lead environment artist at Obsidian. His work is outstanding on Outer Worlds, and I think we all can agree how beautiful this game is. We talked about creating the world of Outer Worlds, and you wouldn't believe the amount of work and artistry that is went to this game. And let's go and listen. Hello, Terry. Welcome to my podcast, What's Up Conversations. I have to congratulate you on the successful release of the Outer Worlds. I've always been a fan of Obsidian. This game is one of the finest projects you guys have released.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm playing it right now, and I'm having so much fun. Awesome game. So, what do you do after releasing such a huge game in this scope?
Well, there's actually, after a title launches, there's quite a lot that still goes on to support the product. We have plenty of bugs that still come in, that need to be addressed, and we need to, figure out all kinds of other just issues that come up. Sometimes they're platform specific, like an Xbox specific or a PlayStation specific issues, and so there's actually quite a bit of support after the product is launched and the physical product gotten out to the store. There's still quite a bit that happens on the tail end to support that for months, afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about you. Tell me about your background and how did you get into the video game industry?
Oh wow, there's a lot actually that kind of led to this. It kind of starts with your parents, and you're sitting there playing video games, and they say, you'll never make a career out of this. Go do something else or whatever. But there was a lot of factors that led for me myself to become a video game artist. I'm fortunate that when I was growing up, in the '80s. Arcades were a thing, so you'd go to the skate park, and then there was just arcade games everywhere, and it was just a completely different experience than your Super NES at home and that kind of thing. So, I also grew up with Star Wars. That was a huge influence of mine. Seeing that, on the big screen, and then going to school and drawing stormtroopers and R2-D2 on your desk, and so that kind of started the artistic flow for me. After that, after I got out of high school, I was leaning towards architecture. I wanted to be an architectural drafter. Was going to go to Arizona State. Decided against it because there was when I was supposed to go, I found out it was 122 degrees or something in Phoenix, and I went, there's no way I'm going to go through that. So, so I started exploring some other options, and one of them actually was special effects movie makeup. I was very much into aliens and, those types of sci-fi horror movie, projects that were out. And unfortunately, at that time, there was no. There were studios that were doing it, but there was no advanced education. You couldn't just go to school and learn how to become a special effects movie, makeup artist. We're talking. This is going to be 87, 88, somewhere around there. And I went down to a studio called Sunset and Gower, and they were doing stuff, but they said, yes, we'd love to have you, but we don't take any kind of student loan. You have to pay for this course outright, and it just wasn't going to happen at the time. So, they said, oh, we'll go to school and, maybe learn how to do makeup or hair or something. So Oddly enough, I went and actually got a barber license. Did hair for a couple of years, which was really weird. But I did that for a couple of years, and then I went into from there. I was playing in a band, of course. In the '80s, of course, I had to be in a metal band. One of the guitar players said, "Hey, we've got a job available at the guitar company that we work for." And so I went to work there, did a whole bunch of jobs, which all actually added up to, working towards becoming an artist. I did a lot of graphic design work, websites, processing images, advertising, promotion, that kind of stuff for them. In addition to other, sales and all kinds of other stuff. But that was right at the time that 3D was kind of becoming a thing. And Cal State Fullerton actually had started, this was the first year that they had a program. So this place, it was G&L Guitars, actually said, "Hey, we'd love to start making some educational promotional material utilizing 3D." So they sent me to Cal State Fullerton to learn how to do this stuff. And, once I was there, and then I found that Autodesk, who's the company that makes 3D Studio Max, was also the same company that made AutoCAD. So now I'm wrapping back around to architectural drafting. But once I saw it in 3D, it was like, okay, I don't need to do architecture anymore. Oh. And wait a minute, I can make 3D stuff and it can apply to a game. So then that's when that started. So I went to school there, Cal State Fullerton, graduated about 2000. And then here's, you figure, well, once you graduate, that's the hard part's over, which that wasn't. It took me almost 4 years of persistently sending out real information and resumes and just practicing and just putting a lot of time into trying to become, a good artist, learning the tools. But like I say, it took roughly 4 years before I finally landed my real first, 3D artist game in the industry, which was that was And One Street Ball for it would be PS2 and original Xbox, and that was at a studio called Black Ops Entertainment up in Santa Monica. So that's kind of where my career started. I had done some freelance and some contract stuff for some studios before then, but it wasn't a real gig. So it took quite some time to get actually into the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Your craft. I mean, last time I had a talk with an environment artist, it was with Chad Chaterton. He's the lead environment artist at working on Division games, and I learned many things from him by that conversation. And I have to say, it's a lot of responsibilities. So tell me about your craft. What are the responsibilities of an environment artist? What do you do day to day?
Sure. Well, actually, I was the lead environment artist on The Outer Worlds here at Obsidian. So here we had a pretty small team. Working at least the environment art team. Actually, no, the whole team was quite small. But the environment art team, I only had 8 people on the team. So I was a production artist as well, because typically an art lead would do more management than actually creating of assets. So I tried to split my time as best I could. I ran about a 60-40 split, where 60% of the time I was creating content, and the other 40% was management, meetings, scheduling, include training of of the team, also showing new techniques, all of that, working with the art director quite a bit to try and establish the actual look of the game. So typically that was most of my day. Would go through and go in, do do a flyby, checking in on all the artists, make sure, they usually have a whole host of questions. Try and help them out however we can, try and find answers, to make sure that everybody's unblocked and everybody can be, work and do what they need to do during the day, but then, get back to my desk by the afternoon and try and create some content on my own.
Yeah. So to create an immersive and relatable world, where do you start? I mean, how do you approach each project?
Right. Well, typically a project will start with, it does usually start with a story, but a lot of times it will start with a beautiful corner, just an art piece that's kind of an initial representation of what the game could be, and a lot of times they don't quite match because, it's very, very early. You don't have concept, the art style hasn't been quite established yet. But usually that's where it starts. You usually end up make just a small section. Sometimes it could just be a room, or it could be, several rooms, or sometimes just a diorama, which is just like a little corner of a section with a couple of pieces in it, just to try and get a visual representation of what we're trying to get across. So usually that's how it starts. And then from there, thankfully we have amazing concept artists here at Obsidian. We just start pouring through a bunch of look and feel, rough sketches, just to try and to find that look or what really calls to us. So there's a little bit of that process for a while, until we finally hone in on something. And then, for the Outer Worlds, that took a while because it's a pretty unique, art style. It's Art Nouveau, which is it was a very, in the scheme of art styles, it was a transitionary period, for going from Art Nouveau to Victorian. So it was a very, very short period of time that, that it was around. So Paris basically has that style. So, we looked at some of that architecture there and just kept iterating on it until we finally got to the look that we were, happy with for the Outer Worlds. But that took quite some time because it wasn't definitive. It wasn't just say, oh, we're going to do, like BioShock, just say, well, I want Art Nouveau and underwater. It wasn't, or for Fallout, we want mid-century modern in the desert. It was a very nebulous art style at first until we finally defined it.
Yeah, I bet it was challenging, and yet it was fun to do this game because kind of each planet has its own environment, and it gives you variation in your daily works, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's that was some of the fun of the Outer Worlds, of how colorful it was and how different each of the environments can be, from a successfully terraformed planet versus a not so successfully terraformed planet. It's like, what does that look like? So we had to, get creative and try and think of not just, it would be neat if the planet looked like this. We tried to make it actually have a little bit of mechanical sense and a little bit grounded in science, even knowing it's not, perfect and precise, but, at least the theory was there,
Yeah, outside the concept arts and story, what are the outside inspirations for this game? Maybe a picture, a painting, or something, another game.
Sure. One of the things that we tried to base some of the architecture, some of the robot stylings, and the basically just the general. So we had some general, basically verbs that we wanted to come across. We wanted it to feel industrial. We wanted it to feel heavy, but and grungy and greasy, but Then there was a whole bunch of things that we didn't want it to be. We didn't want it to be rusty, and we didn't want it to be steampunk, and we didn't want it to be, Art Nouveau or mid-century modern. So that's kind of how we started. We just made a list of words that we thought would describe what it is that we were looking for. And then there's a series of miniatures or models called Krieger. And that was one of the early representations of kind of the heaviness and the bulbous. If you picture a great example of that is Big Daddy from BioShock. Yeah. He has that look, that big bulbous, almost like a deep sea diver, like from the 50s and 60s, like Jacques Cousteau, with the great big huge helmets, and it's just very formed metal, and it looks big and heavy and bulky, and that's kind of what we were trying to capture. But those Krieger models were definitely one that pushed it, at least for, like I say, for robots and assets and the pipe work and all of that went on to the buildings and stuff.
Yeah. So let's talk about environmental storytelling. How important is it in your work, and how do you approach it?
Okay. Environment storytelling is huge. You actually have two parts. You have the storytelling itself, but then another thing to try and capture is environment movement. Just how do you take a world and make it feel like it's living and breathing? That's a huge challenge of some stuff is easy. You've got wind and blowing dust and waving leaves and stuff. That's easy stuff. But when you're inside of a industrial complex, I mean, how do you make it feel like it's alive? And you just try and get creative with swinging wires and sparks and moving machinery and swinging lights, and you just try and create as much movement as you can in the environment. And then for myself, as far as environment storytelling, I don't know if this comes from my architectural background or what, but I'll just start at the beginning of a level, and I just start walking through as if I were a player, and I kind of look at the framing of the camera and envision, okay, well, what's the player see here? What's the focal point? And then I'll look at that and go, like a door is a great example. You look at a door and, okay, we're going to paint this door red just so the player knows, hey, we need to go here, or they can't go there or something. Well, instead of just painting it red, I try and look at it like, well, okay, it's red, but what type of thing is walking through there? Is it people walking through the door? Is it robots walking through the door? Because they're going to leave different types of marks. People are going to leave greasy handprints. Robots are going to leave long, streaky, scratches. Also, what color was the door before it was red? Wow. Was it green? So now, if you've got red chip paint, you want to see that green underneath it, and then all that storytelling, it kind of adds up. It's basically trying to add history to whatever object that it is that you're creating. Don't just make like this table. You really look at it and go, well, the mouse is here all the time, so it, there's a wear mark or coffee ring stain, or just all the history that you can think of what this poor table's been through, and just try and include that in all of your assets. That would be one of the number one recommendations I would give to any beginning artist, is to think about the thing you're making and give it history. Yeah. That's huge. It adds to the authenticity of the piece that you're making.
Do you work with the writers of the game in some cases, for example, if they want to tell a story within the environment? Do you work with them, or is it completely separated?
It is no, there's crossover. So there is sometimes where the artist or designer will come in and say, hey, in this area I would like this to have happened, or how do we visually get this point across? So yeah, often we talk with designer and with writers, the narrative team, into figuring out what it is that they want. Sometimes we have to make assets that help support that, or sometimes it's as simple of, oh, well, there was a massacre, and you have kind of like bloodstains, or just whatever that needs to help support the story in that way. But sometimes environment storytelling has kind of nothing to do with the narrative. You could be walking down a hall, and then you've got part of the wall is blown out, and you can see the pipe, and maybe you put a sign on there saying under construction. So you're just telling a little story of hey, we know this is broken, we're going to repair it, but so that kind of stuff. So it's a bit of both. Some of it's really left open to the artist, the environment artist himself, but there is oftentimes that there are specific narrative points that need to be hit, that that would help, where you can't just put a piece of paper there and explain the situation. You need some visual support.
So is there any difference between an open world game and a very linear game? I mean, imagine Outer World to be a linear game. What would you do if it was not open world?
Well, linear games in general, like say Doom, if you want to go really far back, or Quake, or those types of games where the experience is controlled. And actually, as far as video game development, those are a bit easier. Only not easier in art-wise or story-wise or narrative, but easier in performance and being able to keep your frame rate up and all of that, because you have a very precise, exactly where the player is going to be, and what direction they need to take to complete the mission. In an open world, like Fallout New Vegas, or the Outer Worlds, anything like that, even though in Outer Worlds is more of a hub, like KOTOR, you can't control where the player is going to go, so you have to. So I worked on Monarch. Monarch was I don't know if you reached there in the game yet, but Monarch is the level that basically I worked on. And the way that I did that is work with design. We figure out what the main story plot is, or the story path is, and then usually the first pass art is just focusing on that main player path for the main story. So that's typically where we start. And usually, you follow the roads and you do a little bit off to the sides, but that's usually how we start. And then the second pass is going out to those secondary areas where the player gets off the beaten path, and then we start addressing those areas and making those look just as visually appealing. And then you just look for little nooks and crannies where you can do some of this environment storytelling. There's a great section in Monarch where it's way off the beaten path, and I came up with the idea and then ran it by both Tim and Leonard and the narrative team. But it was a section where I had just put like this cave opening. It was, you just kind of walk through it, and then you're at the edge of this chasm looking at the huge gas giant that's outside of Monarch. And to me, it reminded me of like a lover's point or something like that, where you would go and take your significant other and hang out and look at the moon, right? So I actually made a little sign that said, Olympus Lover's Point, on Monarch. And we just told a whole little story there. And, there's a whole story of like, there's a railing that was there, but it's all bent. And, and the corporations will tell you, well, don't damage our bent railing because, we're going to charge you for it if you do. So it's, you just look for those moments, and it's just really cool when you can, I think, when you can come up with a neat idea that's way off the beaten path, and then when the players discover it, it's really cool. When I go in and I'm watching people do playthroughs on Twitch and YouTube, and I see them discover stuff that I had a hand on. It's just like, it's the coolest feeling ever. And then you could see they get all excited about it, and there's no better feeling. It's really cool.
Yeah. So, what was the last inspirational game in case of environment design for you?
Oh wow. I haven't played enough games since working on Outer Worlds. The ones that I've seen recently, the new Far Cry, the terrain and just the sheer amount of vegetation in that game looks amazing, and that's something that I'd like to spend some more time taking a look at to see how how they accomplished that. I know it's CryEngine, it's a different engine, and CryEngine handles vegetation really efficiently, but I think it's something that was just super impressive when I first looked at it. So that's something I think we really I think I want to spend a little more time pushing some of the terrain and the vegetation. Look at some other games like that Far Cry game.
Yeah. So
yeah.
What are your overall favorite games of all the time?
Oh. Wow. Okay, so I'll go. I'm going to jump way back. So like to arcade time when I was telling you there. Galaga was like a huge thing. It was actually, oddly enough, both my wife and I met basically over a Galaga game.
Oh.
There's a So I was playing at a club. She was working at the club, and they had a cocktail Galaga game, and we just sat down, started playing it, and then 28 years later, here we are. We're still together. So, and we still play Galaga, which is really cool. But Dragon's Lair is another huge one, just because I think Don Bluth's style is just amazing. As far as animation, and it was just so innovative at the time. Another great one is the arcade version of the original Mortal Kombat. Played quite a lot of that. Me and my daughter Samantha, we sit and play it, and she destroys me. So it's pretty cool. As far as current stuff, Half-Life, the original Half-Life from Valve, would be huge. Portal as well. And then as far as open world, the original EverQuest. I spent many, many years playing that as well. So all of those were super inspirational in their own ways, and helping me grow as an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So thank you so much, Terry. It's been great talking to you. The Outer World is truly beautiful, and walking through it, it's a unique world, and it's exciting, adventurous, and memorable. I love you all, guys, at Obsidian, and I hope to see more games from you guys.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's great, and I say, thank you for taking the time. It's really cool, and I'm glad you're enjoying the game. I hope everybody does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you. Take care.